So we all know that the Sixers have been firmly in the mix for just about every big name free agent on the market this summer. But it seems to be being revealed the guy that everything is waiting on. That it feels like every offseason there is this main domino that starts the cycle of free agent changes across the NBA. And I think we now know who the head honcho of this year's offseason is, that being Donovan Mitchell here. We got this recent report saying that the Los Angeles Lakers, Miami Heat, Brooklyn Nets, New Orleans Pelicans, and Philadelphia 76ers will attempt to acquire Donovan Mitchell if he doesn't extend with the Cavs, per Sam Amico Hoops. And that does seem to be the biggest question, is what is the future of Donovan Mitchell? Now, my honest opinion from afar, I do think Donovan Mitchell desires playing in a major market. When you look at his NBA career thus far, he's played for the Utah Jazz and the Cleveland Cavaliers. That is not quite the pristine elite team or organization that you do want to represent, with all due respect to both of those teams. And the Cavs have a really tough decision to make because they flailed out once again. Now, we know that Donovan Mitchell got hurt in the playoffs. This is not like it is his fault. The bottom line is he is that level of dude. And to dive into specifically what he brings to the table here, we're talking about 26.6 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 1.8 steals per game. Also shot 46.2% from the floor, 36.8% from three. He shoots just 32% on corner threes, and 56% of his threes are assisted. Also, 45.4 of those of his overall shots come from beyond the arc, but still just 27 years old. 6'3". I do think he's a little bit bigger in people's heads than he is in actuality. That he is a guard. This is not a guy that is a pseudo wing or a guy that you can play up positions or that type of things. It would be a small backcourt with Tyrese Maxey and Donovan Mitchell. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think the likelihood of Mitchell ending up in Philadelphia is incredibly high. But why I still think it's relevant is that would take some bidders off the market if they are to land it. And the neutral perspective when looking at a lot of these teams, that truly the Nets, the Pelicans, the Lakers, they're all teams, the Lakers probably excluded from this list, but can make an offer a little bit more intriguing than what the Sixers have. That for a lot of these teams, they're going to want a baseline of young talent or a player to get excited about, and that is the unfortunate reality of this flexible game plan. That unless the Sixers can work a sign-and trade for the type of player that interests the Cavs, there's just not that much to trade. To look at their current cap situation, it is just Joel Embiid under contract for $51 million, Paul Reed on a non-guaranteed $7.7 million, Jeff Doughton on a team option at $2.196 million, and Ricky Council on a non-guaranteed $1.89 million. So there are not these things to offer in return to make a Donovan Mitchell deal happen, and I do think that's the biggest hurdle for these types of blockbuster deals, that essentially the Sixers are looking for a team to salary dump or get a player off the books for financial situations, or they're going out and competing in free agency directly. Now, the contract with Donovan Mitchell is an appealing factor here. To dive into exactly what he makes, that this will be the final year of his contract, $35.4 million. He does have the player option next year for $37 million and is going to be due for another extension. I do think Donovan Mitchell is a max player and will continue to be over the next several years. So I do think he will get that level of money. So for the Sixers, if they were to make a deal, you're signing up to pay that pretty penny at the conclusion of this contract. And that is something that would be absolutely okay in my mind. And to be perfectly honest, I do think it's trending towards the Cavs handing him that deal. It's interesting, this conversation between players and teams, that I do think Donovan Mitchell does not see him playing out the entirety of that contract in Cleveland, but for Mitchell's sake, that he does get that level of security that he knows no matter what location it's going to be, he's going to get that dollar sign number. An example of this being Bradley Beal, who now plays for the Phoenix Suns, but signed that lucrative extension when he was still with the Washington Wizards. Beal knew he wanted out. He knew that he was not going to play the entirety of that contract, but he guaranteed himself that he'd be getting $50 million on an annual basis, and then took it wherever the winds would go. And by the way, managed to get himself a no-trade clause as well. I don't think that's going to be quite the situation with Donovan Mitchell, but a similar extent. And for the organization, it does work as well, because the worst-case scenario, the worst thing you can do when managing a player or managing a team is to lose them for nothing. So by giving him this contract and then putting up for whatever level of unhappiness will be coming in the future, you're at least guaranteeing that you are in control of wherever you want to send him, and more importantly, what is coming back in return when a trade does occur. Now, the biggest conversation in Cleveland, it comes down to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And the reason that I bring that up is I think Garland is a pretty significant piece of this offseason picture as well. Now, we see the shortcomings on the court, that this is unfortunately the reality of having two smaller frame point guards, Garland and Mitchell, a little repetitive in their skill sets, and why the Cavs have tried to combat that by having this double big lineup, guys like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, to make up for their defensive shortcomings. The roster construction as a whole has just not quite been there. That I think they're short on shooting. That's even after bringing in Max Strus and our guy Georges Niang. The true wings, guys like Isaac Okoro, have some holes in their games. I just think there's an ingredient missing with this Cavs team, and I do think all signs point to them breaking this duo up. And it looks like everyone's on the same page for this. That we got a report saying from Shams Charania, Joe Varden, and Jason Lloyd of The Athletic reported that Darius Garland's representation, Clutch Sports CEO Rich Paul, would discuss a potential trade with the team's front office if Donovan Mitchell decides to stay in Cleveland on a long-term contract extension. The report also noted that, quote, rival executives believe the Cavs will have to seriously evaluate the fit of Mitchell and Garland and ultimately may have to choose one or the other. And now the reason that I bring that up is that is another piece of this offseason puzzle, as teams will be going out of their way to bring in Darius Garland. At one point in time, I was a huge Darius Garland guy. I've been very disappointed in a little bit of how his career trajectory has gone. That to dive into his stats here for this specific season, 18 points per game, 6.5 assists, 2.7 rebounds, 1.3 steals per game, shot 44.6 from the floor and 37.1% from three. He also does shoot 44% on corner threes, and 65.2% of his threes are assisted. Still just 24 years old, but 6'1" as well. He's a guy that has shown a ton of promise, a ton of intriguing characteristics in his game, but ultimately just fell flat of my expectations this year. I did want to take a wider view of his stats here to point out why I say that, is we did see him become an all-star in the 21-22 season. That year, averaging 21.7 points, 8.6 assists. Also shot a really impressive 38.3% from beyond the three-point arc. Then the following year was in about the same, that we saw a slight regression, more so from the playmaking aspect, that his assists slipped from 8.6 to 7.8. Scoring stayed about the same at 21.7, dropped to 21.6, and improved on his three-point shooting, 41% from beyond the three-point arc there. But then this season, we saw a little bit of a regression in his game overall. That scoring total slipped to that 18 points per game. The assists dropped to 6.5 per game, which is 2 whole assists, 2.1 assists shorter than it was his all-star season. Now, in fairness to Garland, he did deal with some injuries, that he got hit in the eye a ton of times this season. I believe he re-injured it, missed a couple games for his eye. He was beat up as a whole. And again, I do think the fit between Garland and Mitchell is the main conversation here. The Cavs have a tough decision to make, and the bottom line is that they're going to do their best to keep the top-end talent if they can, that being Donovan Mitchell. So if Darius Garland is the expense, it would not surprise me if he is a guy that pops on the market. Now, from the Sixers' perspective, I have zero interest in Darius Garland. I like him as a player. I still be rooting for him to turn his career around to an extent. Not that he is anything that's super poor right now, but I do believe he's better than he played this season and will show that. My honest expectation, I think the San Antonio Spurs are a team that's going to jump in the mix, get involved in the Darius Garland, and pairing him with Victor Wembanyama would be quite fun to watch. But I do think that begins to stir the offseason circle, that you start to see where these guys land. And the Sixers, and Daryl Morey specifically, he's not going to be a guy that sells this team short. That we know how many interest and how much rumors there have been this offseason, that just so far the Sixers have been linked to Paul George, LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, OG Anunoby, Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Klay Thompson. If it is a big name that is remotely available, you better believe Daryl Morey is picking up the phone and at least having the conversation. And I do think that starts with Donovan Mitchell, who I would argue is probably the biggest top-end talent that is on the market. Sure, you can make the case a guy like LeBron James or even a guy like Mikal Bridges might top that. Paul George certainly in the same sphere. These are all players somewhat in the same stratosphere of player. And my last point with all these guys here, none of them are perfect. That if they were a perfect player, if they were in the ideal situation, if everything was going great, they would not be leaving their team. Now, some of these flaws are a little different from each guy. For example, with Paul George, we know it clearly comes down to money. There's other situations and guys are looking for a clean slate or a better basketball fit for them, or maybe a situation like Mikal Bridges where he could be sick of losing and wants to play for a more winning organization. Everyone beats a little different or has a little different outlook as it pertains to that. But if they were the perfect player, they simply would not be available. So while there are holes in all these guys, keep a little bit of an open mind because of that exact factor. And the Sixers are an appealing destination because of what there is established so far with Joel Embiid, with Nick Nurse, with Tyrese Maxey ready to sign a rich deal himself. So we'll see what happens from here, but I do think until there is some clarity on the Donovan Mitchell conversation, that we will not know which direction these Sixers are going to go. That I do think that is the biggest fish that will land before the rest of the NBA puzzle begins to put together. So we'll see what happens when that is the case. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Would you be open to Donovan Mitchell if you have a remote chance of landing him on the Sixers team? I know I was a little bit skeptical about the small backcourt of Cleveland. I do just believe Tyrese Maxey is just straight up better than Darius Garland in a way that does give me a chance to believe Mitchell could be a fit here. And for Mitchell specifically, he is a bulldog, that he's ready to get his shot in the biggest moments, a really great shot creator both for himself and others. He's a guy that has been a playoff riser thus far. I do think is desiring that new location, new chance. And the New York Knicks, who've been a team constantly attached to him, doesn't make sense anymore with how much Jalen Brunson has ascended and become the face of that franchise. So I do think it is a true open bidding war if that is the direction that things go, but ultimately conversations to be had behind closed doors in Cleveland. So let me know what you guys think overall. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button to keep the Digest family growing. Drop a like on this video, and I'll be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.